Welcome everyone. I'm going to call the Suwannee County Classification and Compensation Study Workshop to order. I've asked. Oh, my bad. My mic was not on.
Commissioner Hill.
I want to ask Commissioner Hale to lead us in the prayer, and Commissioner White's going to lead us in the pledge. So if y'all would please stand.
Right. Thank you, everybody. Lord, we thank you for this day. Thank you for the opportunity to come together, work on the county projects. Lord, we pray that you'll watch over us, you'll guide us. Lord, we pray that you'll protect our country, protect those abroad in the world that need your help. Lord, most of all, forgive us of our sins. We are all sinners, Lord, and we pray for your forgiveness. In Jesus' name, amen.
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 I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, first item on the agenda is, I believe, the classification and compensation study. Mr. Scott, is Mr. Williamson, I believe, is our presenter?
Yes, sir. Rob would be glad to take it from here and rock and roll.
All right. Welcome, sir.
How we doing?
Good. Yourself?
Very good to be here. Just a short drive over from the house, which is nice, as opposed to the plane flight that I'm going to get on that will take me to Houston, Texas on Monday. And no, I'm not looking forward to that. I'd rather be here. But I'm grateful to be with you and grateful for the business. Senior consultant Carl Fuchs actually started this journey with your team, and I had the opportunity to take over when Carl moved on to another position. But I did want to say at the outset that I am blessed to work with a lot of public sector professionals around the country, and y'all got a heck of a team here. Greg, Jason, Andy, Paula, the work that they did along the way, they made the transition very easy, but they also have a high level of knowledge and go about their business in the right way. So you should definitely be proud of the work they've done. The presentation here today should last about 15, 20 minutes for the slides. At any point, stop me if you have any questions. I believe you've been provided a copy of that in your packets. I get to do this every day, all day, y'all. Okay, so I get to geek out on the numbers and all of this stuff, and I understand this might not be the thing that you wake up thinking, man, I can't wait to talk about compensation and classification and benefits today. So, at any point along the way, we start getting in the weeds too much, or you have specific questions about what we're recommending or what the impact of some of this data might be. Ultimately, the goal is we want to give you as policymakers the best possible information so you can make the most informed decision possible. And that's what we're trying to do here today. So the agenda, we're just going to talk about a little bit about the study purpose, and then we kind of break it down into those main silos that y'all hired us to do for you, which is survey the employees, survey the market for salary and benefits, put that information together, and then we find ourselves where we are today, where we're going to report on it. Bottom line, I could net this slide out here with just 2 points. You want a fair and competitive pay plan. You want to be able to compete in the marketplace, and you want to know that you're paying employees fairly, that the relationship between the jobs that they do in your organization is fair, and that it's competitive with market. And that's ultimately what we're trying to do. When it says the importance piece there, it's reestablishing that competitive market position. What does that look like? Right at the outset, I'll tell you before we get to the recommendations that what we're going to put forward to you does not place Suwannee County as the most expensive, highest paid entity of the 67 counties in the state of Florida. This is what we tried to do is strike the balance between fair, competitive, but also being fiscally responsible. We understand that you have to be good stewards of taxpayer dollars. And so with that in mind, the recommendations, if we have 10 counties that we're comparing y'all to, y'all aren't going to be 10th. We didn't put you there, okay? But the idea is that we want to at least be at the market average to where we can compete there. What we've done to this point is we had a kickoff call with your project leadership team, the folks that I identified there earlier. We did an assessment of current conditions. What goes into the blocking and tackling of how you pay people here currently to where we could gain a clear understanding of that. Then we had on-site orientation sessions, focus groups, talking to your team. Then we conducted that employee survey. Then we have the external equity analysis, which is fancy consultant speak for, we did a comp survey that included also benefits with that as well. And then we ultimately make recommendations on those findings, and we find ourselves at the presentation and acceptance of findings piece. So the compensation philosophy, why is it important for you as policymakers to put a flag in the ground and say this is what we want to have as a compensation philosophy? Because it lets staff know what the goals are when you're looking at beginning your budgetary process, and they know, okay, we need to make sure that we have pay ranges that are competitive with the market. We need to make sure we know how employees are going to progress. We need to make sure we know how folks are going to be rewarded. We also need to know what are we going to do with the job classifications as well, and what's the type of pay plan, meaning what's the structure going to be like. So all of that is the backdrop. It's also important for prospective employees to know what's it going to be like if I want to come to work here. And so you kind of have some rules of engagement. So we tried to help create that a little bit with your team. Some overarching themes there is that we do want it to be competitive with the market average. What does that mean? If we take the counties, let's say we've got 10 counties that we want to compare you to, we want to average their pay ranges together and get to an average pay range. What's the minimum, the starting salaries, and what's the maximum, what they could expect to earn over the course of their tenure here. That's that pay range, that's that average pay range that we're talking about. Then we want it to be fair, and we've got the open range pay plan. That just means it's not a step plan. It provides you more flexibility to reward high performers, to have somebody be slotted specifically into the pay plan at a rate that would honor their experience, but also their performance. And then we're going to move employees every year based on a cost of living adjustment, as well as honor their tenure, and then we're going to reward longevity. What you see here is the classification employee participation. When we did the employee survey for y'all, we gave every employee, I think you got around 230 folks, we gave everyone an opportunity to complete the employee survey. Participation was above the national average. We usually average around 65%. You had about 79% completion rate. But the most important part is that almost 90% classification participation rate. What that means is we captured a survey for 90% of your jobs. That gives us a very clear understanding of what are the essential functions that employees are performing in their role. Why is this important? It gets us to a more defensible recommendation. It's a data-driven process. Now we talked a little bit about the compensation outlook, and I wanted to throw in a couple of slides that kind of give you, as policymakers, a 30,000-foot view of where we are nationally, and then I'll bring it back home here. Overall, you could say that the labor market is really frozen right now to a certain degree. Yes, there have been some targeted segments of the economy, the workforce, that have had more layoffs than others, but overall you have employers that still remember the pain coming out of post-COVID where they couldn't hire anybody, so they're a little reluctant to lay people off, and you have employees that are not being rewarded for changing jobs the way they were coming out of COVID. Nationally, coming out of COVID 2021, 2022, on average, an employee would get more than 16% increase by changing jobs. Now, that's not the case, so they're staying where they're at. The good news is that for the first time in a long time in the public sector, you're going to have access to more talent than you've ever had. And the reason for that is, this is not meant to be a political statement here, just the simple reality is that there is currently an ongoing reduction in the size of the federal workforce. And that is not going to slow down. That's reality. That's happening. As somebody once told me a long time ago, elections have consequences. And the consequences of this election are there's going to be a concerted effort to reduce the size of the federal workforce. What that means is you're going to have professionals that are no longer working the federal government that are going to be available to work in local government. That's the good news. The bad news is there's probably going to be more unfunded mandates that are coming your way from Tallahassee, because those folks that were providing those services at the federal level and in some instances the state level are not there anymore, so they're looking for y'all to provide that. And I'm sure that you're familiar with the we'll call it the attack of home rule that's been happening over the course of the last decade for sure. The next generation of talent, that last bullet, it's important for you all to know as policymakers what's important to the next generation of talent when they're making their decisions. Culture is incredibly important. Work-life balance, opportunities for career development, and faster than we've ever seen, where they're looking to have advancement within 6 months, within a year, instead of waiting. And then the idea of flexible benefits is becoming important as well. This is just a graphic representation of where we are with wages and where we are with CPI or inflation. The good news is we've come down off that 9% handle in 2022, where it was, I think, June of 2022, 9% inflation. We're returning back to the trend. The bad news is we haven't reached the Fed target rate of 2%, and things are getting sticky related to inflation. It's come down a lot, but it's not going away. And wages are still increasing. What does that mean to you as a policymaker? Pretty much that the do-nothing option is not afforded to you. If you want to stay competitive with market, you're going to have to continue to move salaries and salary ranges because the market is still moving at about a 3.8% clip. Compensation review, as we bring this back home to Suwannee County. We did a compensation study. This was not evergreen on their own, deciding what were going to be the comparisons. At every step along the way in this collaborative process, we work with your team to identify who are the target market peers that we want to compare to, some on the high end, some on the low end, and trying to get a good gauge of what the market would be. We ultimately landed on 13 market peers. We went out and collected data. 11 of those 13 provided data for us to use in the study. We had 110 overall job classifications that were included, and we had a very robust match count of 7 matches for every classification. Some were quite a bit higher than that. For any of the counties that fall outside the area, we're adjusting for cost of living to where we can try to get to a more of an apples-to-apples comparison for these positions when we get outside of the local market. And then we were making sure that we're establishing a competitive pay range at the market average. Any of the positions that didn't return at least 5, we did not include. I realize this is a little small to read. Y'all might be a little bit better on the printout that you have, but what you're looking at now is those positions and what ultimately the average range that was returned. So this is important because we use these average ranges not as a absolute, meaning that if it says, excuse me, the minimum is $40,000, that we're going to recommend that somebody has to be paid $40,000. But we're using this as a frame of reference. We're using this as an additional tool in the tool belt that when we recommend a new pay plan for you, we're looking at what's the relationship of positions that you currently have. What are you currently paying folks? What's the market say that you should be paying? And then we're putting all of that together to make a recommendation. But this gives you an idea of the positions that you have, what the market says the average should be at the minimum, the midpoint, and the maximum. Now the next slide is pretty important because you'll see down at the bottom that it says that y'all are 54% behind market at the minimum. Now, I don't want anyone to think that we're recommending that you give people a 54% raise, okay? That's not where we're going with this. I have plenty of clients, y'all will be one of them, where your pay ranges are way behind market, but what you're actually paying folks is a different ballgame. Okay, and that's why when we get to the money slide later on, you don't see a requested increase of 25% or something like that. I think it's 3.5% of payroll is what we're recommending, which is one of the lower ones I've had in the last 2 years. But your pay ranges, why they're important is typically that's the published range that when you go to advertise for a position, you might put out there. So if you have a $27,000 minimum pay range that you put out for a position, and there's so many resources out there that an applicant would know that that position should pay a minimum of $32,000, they might not even apply. So the number of applicants that you might get would be greatly reduced, or the quality of applicants that you might get would be greatly reduced. Combine that with the fact that the average at the maximum as well is behind market in all 3 tiers. It is something that is impacting you in a way that it doesn't need to, because you don't need to hire me to tell you that your ranges are behind market. You're not hiring people at $27,000. You have to hire them above that because that's what the market will bear. So let's go ahead and make sure our ranges are consistent with where the market lands at the average. So the new pay plan that we've got for you, numeric pay grading, that was another thing that we saw here where you did have pay ranges, but you might have different positions with different minimums, or they might all be lumped up into the same pay range and the same minimum. What we're trying to do is give you defined pay ranges with a standard progression between those pay ranges and a standard range spread. The range is that distance between the minimum and the maximum. We also created one pay plan for fire employees, and the range spread is a little bit narrower for the fire pay plan because, as we know, for safety professionals, typically that starting, the minimum is really the most important part of the pay plan. Now we can move on to benefits real quick, and what you're seeing with benefits is a comparison similar to the salary. Okay, the market salary results, we average those results together and we try to provide a comparison of that to Suwannee County's salary ranges. Well, when we look at benefits, we do the same thing. What are the core benefits that you provide, and how do those compare to the market? A couple of main things that jump out to us. There's, the percentage of total compensation is pretty important. Y'all are consistent with the market there, which is good. Flexibility of pay plans offered, y'all are right there. That's good. And then, when we look at the distribution that y'all do in a PPO, primarily, then you got the peer, 75% of the ones that responded are PPO. The punchline for the healthcare piece, because usually that's the most important one, is you're in line with the market for individual coverage. You pay for the whole thing, 100%, right? That's pretty standard across the country now, all right? Where the difference happens, and something that you may need to consider moving forward adjusting if it becomes an issue, is the family coverage. When we look at family coverage, overall the market average is employers are covering 70%, the employees covering 30%. For y'all, it's pretty much inverted. It's the opposite. And so for those folks that need coverage that falls outside of just them as the individual and involves a family plan, I know that can be incredibly expensive, especially considering mod rates and different things that you have within your participation. But bottom line, it's my job to let you know where you could be at a competitive disadvantage, and family coverage, that would be one that you might want to consider making amendments to. There is your numbers there. We broke it down for the ones with health savings accounts, HMO, to where you can get an idea across the marketplace what that looks like. Dental and vision, not, I wouldn't say core benefits. Vision, you're in line, but with dental, we're starting to notice more and more employers offering some type of coverage or a majority of coverage. A lot of times with your health care provider, you can have that added on for not a crazy addition. I would say this is in the category of you need to monitor it. If you see the percentage of participation from employers continuing to increase, you don't want somebody to be making employment decisions. They're probably not going to decide to come to work here based on your dental insurance, but if you put dental insurance in there with tuition reimbursement and family coverage, you start to get a cumulative effect where somebody might make a decision to move, work somewhere else than here. And this is noticeable. I mean, over 60% are offering employer dental coverage. Comes to retirement, y'all are in line there. We were using FRS, but your vesting is good. Percentage contribution is in line. Everything looks fine there as far as retirement goes. There's no competitive advantage. Time off, some folks do different versions. I try to aggregate things together to where you may offer sick leave and vacation, somebody else offers PTO, but bottom line, as an employee, what am I going to get a year in the way of paid time off? And I feel as though y'all are in line there. Where you exceed the market a little bit is in that what you could possibly get paid out upon voluntary separation. Y'all are definitely leading the market there. And for more tenured employees or employees that you might hire that bring some experience in with them, that's not nothing. So that's an important thing to preserve. I feel like that's a differentiator there to the good for y'all. Holidays are something that I'm telling clients that, if you have identified days where you know that your customers, in this case it's your constituents and your citizens, are not going to be looking for services, those are the times when you should be looking to line up your days off, maybe with the school district, maybe lining it up with when your citizens aren't going to be requiring services, because it just gives your folks an opportunity to recharge. It gives them an opportunity to have that extra day, but it doesn't impact operations, or it's a very minimal impact on operations, and it doesn't impact cost either. And it's also equitable. Right now, you're 1 day less than the overall average for the market. So here again, I'm not insinuating that y'all are way behind market and you're at a huge competitive disadvantage, but you could probably add Juneteenth, or you could add a personal holiday, and that would put you at the market. Last few slides, key considerations. Evergreen did not recommend a reduction in salary for any employees as a result of this. We figured that you didn't bring us in to start looking at reducing salaries, and we quite honestly didn't see any reason for that. I talked about how we go about putting classifications into the plan, but as far as how do we put employees into the plan, overall the process is, the first thing we want to do is we want to take all of your jobs, your job titles, and we want to move them into new market competitive pay ranges. Then after we do that, we have to take the employees that occupy these jobs, and we got to move them into those new pay ranges. Well, there's different ways we can do that, and they all have a price tag, and they all have an impact. This is where we get to the, I would say, fiscally conservative, or I would call it responsible would be a better word, is what I would use as far as implementation. Bring to minimum is what we are recommending to transition employees into this new plan. Here's the money slide, gentlemen. This slide here shows you base salary adjusted for cost of living. The bring to minimum represents 3.5% of payroll. Your team can let you know what the all-in cost is. This isn't taxes, benefits, everything all in. This is the base annual salary. If we tried to correct all of the wage compression in your plan, you're looking at $1.2 million by using one of those parity options. When you hear the word parity, think time. That means we'd be moving employees into their new pay range based on tenure. How long have they been in service to Suwannee County? How long have they been in their current job title? A combination of the two. What we're recommending is, let's stand up the plan, let's implement the new structure, adopt the new pay plan, let's move any employees that are behind the minimum of their new pay range to at least bring them to the minimum of the new pay plan. Those employees that are already above the minimum would not see an adjustment outside of any COLA that y'all might be looking to approve as part of your budget process or normal progression. So for example, let's say I'm making 35 grand. Let's say the new pay range that I'm going to be slotted into starts at 36,000. That means I'm going to get a $1,000 raise, because you're going to take me from my 35, you're going to bring me to the minimum, which is 36. Let's say I'm making 37,000, that same example. No raise is given, no adjustment. I'm making 37, the bring to minimum is at 36, so I'm already making more than that new pay range would put me into. I don't want you to feel as though this recommendation is, it's all going to be rainbows and unicorns after this, and it's a huge, everybody's problems are solved. There's still wage compression in your overall organization, meaning you've got employees that are in like positions that are making similar amounts of money that may have significantly different tenure. You've got right now, I think, less than 4 years. What is it, 9? I don't think I had that right. You had 31 employees that have more than 20 years. That's a good little bit. So you have some tenured employees, but you have a significant number of employees that are less than 4 years. What that tells me is you've got a little bit of turnover, and turnover is expensive. So here again, I feel like this is a fiscally responsible recommendation. It is by no means the most expensive. It doesn't put your salaries at the most expensive. It puts them at the average. And I believe your team is still going to need to make adjustments moving forward in the next 12 months to satisfy some or correct some of the big wage compression issues you might have. But this will get you a long, long way to solving a lot of your problems. And I'll make myself available to try to answer any questions you might have. I know that was a lot in a little bit of time.
Any board members got any questions?
I do. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
You got a Florida State button on there.
Yes, sir. Yeah, it's very important.
We're going to have to reject this whole thing.
Yeah. I make sure to get payment before I put that pin on, sir.
He's overruled.
We got to celebrate where we can, you know what I mean?
On all your findings here, did staff, I'm just making this clear for the public, was this all you guys coming up with this? Did staff make recommendations on what this spread was, or what the top salary was, or what the minimum salary was? Or is it strictly just outside?
Phenomenal question. This is not about personalities. It's not about picking winners and losers. This is formulaic, sir. So when we're talking about the bring to minimum and those different options there and the cost, that is put into an Excel spreadsheet, and it is based on my job title is custodian. And as a custodian, I'm going to get put into pay grade 101. And the pay range for 101 is this minimum to this maximum. And I'm going to be put into that pay range based on my current annual salary. Not my current annual salary, but, you know, he's a pretty good guy. You know, maybe we should give him a little bit more. That's not what this does. This is what's the current annual salary, what's the job title, what's the pay range we're putting them into. That's it. Now, as far as did we work with your team when I presented the initial recommendations to make sure that we understood the impact of these? Absolutely. Met with the fire chief to talk through some of the discrepancies in the market data, which he was right. And so we were able to identify some of those and get those corrected. That's the whole part of it being a collaborative process. But at no time were we making decisions based on personalities.
That's what I'm getting at. You
Yes,
weren't
sir.
influenced in any way to come up with any certain pay grade for a certain position.
The data is the defense. It is what it is.
Yeah, Mr. Mobley.
What counties did you compare us to? Or the 11 participants, if you will.
Yeah, and
Or our peers, the market peers, wherever it was. Or if you had a list of the counties that you compared it to. And I would assume on the heels of that, those 13 that you looked at are close to the population size of the county, et cetera.
so Columbia, DeSoto, Gadsden, Hendry, Highlands, Indian River, Jackson, Levy, Okeechobee, Putnam, Sumter, and Alachua. So on the high end, if we're talking about population size, obviously Alachua is going to be the highest. So Alachua, Indian River, and Highlands. On the low end, you're going to be DeSoto, Gadsden, Okeechobee,
Jackson.
Putnam, yeah. I mean, trying to also look for some that would be, you know, you're trying to strike that balance between not taking ones that are all beyond the high end, but I'm also trying to look for, best I can, some similarities in the positions and a little bit of the overall, trying to get an overall defensible pay range. Here again, these were selected before I arrived on scene, to use a public safety term, but I do feel like it's a good mix overall. That would have been a decision that would have been worked through with your team. Another thing to note, that those positions are selected, it starts with the kickoff call asking, who do you think we should compare y'all to? Then we ask the same question of folks when we're here doing the in-person focus group sessions. Who do you think we should be comparing you to? Then we put forward our own list. Ultimately, that's reviewed with the leadership team and it's approved, and then we go out to market.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir. Commissioner Perkins.
So in choosing those counties, was that looking at those counties having like industrial or like businesses in the same area, the same that matches what Suwannee County has? And I didn't hear like Columbia or either Hamilton County in there.
He said Columbia.
Yes, sir. And I apologize for not having that in the slide. After the meeting's over, I can email the list to staff and they can get that to you. I know trying to do this on the fly, but yes, sir, Columbia was on there.
Okay.
As far as which ones of the 67 or 66 remaining to put on there, you know, we're trying our best to get those ones that would be similar in size. That's pretty important.
Well, not just size, but similar in makeup as far as cost of living goes too, because just because of population size doesn't mean that, like Nassau's pretty small, but their cost of living is significantly higher due to coastal communities and right outside of Jacksonville. So you didn't really use them, although their population's close to ours. But I don't know. I feel like you got, obviously Alachua kind of higher cost of living, higher population, but then you got Jackson and some others you said in there that are a lot smaller and probably a lot less cost of living because they're a lot more rural and a lot less populated.
You bring up a good point, Mr. Chairman. Keep in mind that we do adjust for cost of living too. So when we captured those positions in Alachua County, we're adjusting them down because of, y'all are at 98.2, they're at a 101 for cost of living. So we're adjusting their pay ranges down to try to compare here when it fit in the average. So good on you for bringing that up.
Mr. Williamson, right?
Just Rob. Yes, sir.
Okay. The 439, the bring to the MIM, I think I heard you right, but that's just straight wages. That doesn't include benefits or taxes or anything. What did you say about that? Or is that that's the whole number?
That's base salary. That is not total general fund impact. Yes, sir.
Okay.
Because when we're comparing to the salaries in the market, we're doing the same thing. We're looking at base salary.
So where's Keith? Keith, do you have a formula that would generate a number on what, based on base pay? Is there a 1.25 or 1.35 that you would add to get a total impact on general fund?
I can put a formula together. We have a 7.65 for profit Medicare percent. Then the retirements probably about 13.5%. I forgot the exact number.
I was trying to figure out what that multiplier might be, if it's 1.25, 1.35. In that,
the 3.5 is probably, you're going to be a little bit safer if you're in that 35% number. Yes, sir.
Was any consideration taken into, we offer a 1% longevity raise and a 50-cent an hour raise every year? So is that reflected in this at all, or does it compute into that?
I think where the longevity helps you is it's similar to the benefits. If you pay a market competitive wage, then benefits that meet or exceed the market and or these supplemental pays like longevity, that helps provide a greater competitive advantage in the marketplace. Or that might take your market average salaries, and when you add in benefits and longevity, that might push them to be maybe equivalent to the 60th percentile of the market. So if you had 10 and you're ranked 5th for pay, when you add in your benefits and longevity, maybe you'd rank 6th for total compensation. What you want to be careful of, not that y'all are doing this, but you wouldn't want to use benefits or longevity as a justification to pay a less than competitive wage, because you're always going to lose out on the turnover with that and maintaining higher vacancy rates. You always want to start from a place of paying at least a market competitive wage at the average or above before you add in those other things.
So basically what you're saying is that would be your advertised solicited, would be that base, that marketable or equal to market base pay.
Yes, sir, and then use that other stuff as a recruitment and retention tool.
Mm-hmm.
When you talk about wage compression, when we do the 1% longevity and 50-cent an hour raise, you've got a compounding effect going on there as well, because you're adding it to their pay every year, and then it's compounding on top of that every year. And that's a concern of mine, is when you get into these higher pay scales and you start compounding that money out, I think I don't know, I'm just saying, it looks like to me it grows a lot quicker, your payroll. I mean, I don't know, it's just in my thought, you keep compounding that 1% 50 cent an hour raise, and it's different for a guy that's making 30 grand a year versus a guy that's making $135,000 or $150,000 a year. What's your thoughts on that?
I think the longevity pay applied equitably across based on tenure is a valuable recruitment and retention tool. The 50 cents an hour increase, that's not, that juice isn't worth the squeeze, if I'm being honest. So I think, trying to look at what is the CPI regionally, what's the cost of living increase? And I'm not saying that you should match that every year. We were at 9%. I wasn't telling, cities and counties that they need to give 9% raises. That's not realistic, But if you were doing a 3-year rolling average or something like that, I think a 2.5% cost of living adjustment in this market would have you keep your pay with market. You wouldn't fall farther behind. But to your point, you give somebody that's making 60 grand a 50 cent an hour raise. What are we talking about here? You know what I mean? Like, I don't know that that's going to have the impact. And the other thing is, after it's done year after year, it becomes something that the market knows about, and it can almost hurt you more than it helps you, because they know that the possible increase is not going to keep pace with the market. And so they know, well, if I go to work here, this is what they always do. And so I think you see that reflected a little bit in the number of employees that you have here that have less than 4 years of tenure. It's almost half your labor force.
Is there any comparison to the private sector?
Well, private sector, I'm probably averaging 57 hours a week right now on my timesheet, and I think that's probably a little bit more than my friends in the public sector right now. And I spend a little bit more time away from home than I would like. But the money ain't bad. So I think there's a work-life balance trade-off there for sure. And, the market that y'all are in, it's pretty competitive. It's pretty tough given the location and the service levels that you need to provide. But I think, having a philosophy where y'all are telling folks we're going to do our best to put into our budget some increase every year, but we're going to base that increase off of something that is tied to the market, I think that would probably be more beneficial to you than just a static 50-cent increase.
So if I'm hearing you right, based on your experiences across the country with municipalities, the whole 1% and 50 cent is kind of a stagnant, if you will, for us as far as recruitment goes. I mean, it could potentially be better for the employees if the board said, and whatever board it was at the time, said, hey, we're going to look at CPI or inflation, and that annual percentage range may be 3% this year, it may be 1% in year 3 or whatever, but the 1% and 50, that's just kind of what I heard you say is other municipalities aren't doing the 1% and 50. They have a more of a variable rate, if you will, not just us 1% and 50, 1% and 50, and that's kind of what's hurting us on some of the retention, if I'm hearing you.
And you mentioned that it would be better for the employees. I don't want to be disrespectful to taxpayers and make it sound like, a 50-cent increase, that doesn't impact them. Ultimately, they're paying for it no matter what the increase may or may not be. And I realize that it's a tough decision. By the time decisions get to you, all the easy ones are taken. So I understand this is something that you're weighing. But yes, sir. I don't see a lot of examples of static across the board increases because it impacts employees differently. And I would also argue that if turnover goes up as a result of we'll call it a progression allotment or, expected compensation that an employee can kind of see, all right, if I go to work there, this is typically what they've done. No guarantees. We might have a 2008, 2009 year where people are just glad to keep their job. We all remember that, you know what I mean? But in a normal year, I can expect this type of increase. If that helps keep turnover down just a little bit, that's saving y'all a ton of money. Because every time you have to replace an hourly employee, that turnover cost is 50% of their annual salary. Mm-hmm. Every time you replace a supervisor or middle management, that's 1.5 times their annual salary. It's always cheaper to retain an employee than it is to go out and try to train and replace that employee.
So on the heels of that, because I hear what you're saying, but I'm hearing it two ways. The 50 cent and 1% is, I thought I heard you say that's a great way to incentivize, to retain and incentivize.
No, sir. The 1% longevity is if it's in addition to a competitive annual wage, and the 50 cent, I would pivot away from a flat 50 cent and go to something that would be based off of CPI.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
I thought I misunderstood.
So a CPI in addition to the 1%, or get away from the 1% and 50 and go to something that's more variable, like a 1%, 3%, 2%, 2.5% over, based on whatever CPI index looks like?
Well, I think we're talking about the impact would be two different things. CPI is to try to keep your pay ranges consistent and your pay consistent with market.
Right.
Okay, so if inflation is a year trailing at 2.5%, if you give employees a 2.5% increase, that's basically keeping them right where they're at as it relates to how much it costs to pay for bills. The 1% is outside of that. That's more of a retention tool, and it's something where you're valuing the loyalty and tenure for an employee because they've decided to stay with you. So one is about keeping competitive with market. The other one might be a recruitment and retention tool. Now, when you combine both of those together, you know, there may be adjustments where instead of that 2.5% CPI, maybe you do 2% as kind of a blended overall, you know what I mean, depending on the fiscal realities at play. But money's no object. You'd want to adjust by CPI, and then it would be great to have longevity in addition to that.
Yeah, that's where I was going, was both at the same time, if it was some type of variable.
Well, I'm still going to go back and hammer on the private sector, because this is what I get to hear all the time.
Yeah.
You're overpaying everybody based on the private sector, and don't take offense to this, y'all, but this is the phone calls I get.
Sure.
Why are you paying somebody that much money? Why are you doing that? And I can justify it most of the time, but I'm just asking, is there any comparison to like a road grader operator in the public sector versus a road grader operator in the private sector?
Yeah, if I go hop on a motor grader, I'm going to make more there than I am here all day long and twice on Sunday. They have to. Now
because you got a big benefit spread there a lot of times in the versus public versus private sector. You don't have the retirement that they have here.
And that is significant. You know, and in the private sector, for an individual, the benefits are not as different as they used to be. You know, used to it was, well, you know, you're not going to get rich here working at the city or the county, but your benefits are going to be next level. You know, they're going to be so much better than they are in the private sector. And for individual, that gap has narrowed significantly. But to your point on the private sector salaries versus public sector, you know, this is a matter of public record now. Those salaries, the minimum, midpoint, and maximum pay ranges, you know, the numbers are the numbers. It's one of those things where may not like the numbers, may not like what it says a custodian should be paid in the market. Heck, the custodian might not like what it says they should be paid in the market, but that's what it is. And so when we look at equipment operator 1 and those type of things in public works, you know, if you're here again, we're asking that you pay at least at the market average. That's the other important point. So if I had a constituent telling me, you know, you're paying too much, I'd ask them compared to what? You know, we've got, if you had 10 counties, there's still 5 that pay more than y'all with what we've recommended. You know, I mean, I know that times, you know, everything's tight, but this is trying to be as fiscally responsible as we could get it.
I just feel like we have our turnover more on the lower paid positions where we have our more turnover. or we're not?
Some of them you do,
Yes.
but when you're looking at, I think, 90 positions that are less than 4 years of tenure, I think you got 230 employees, and if you've got almost half of them that are under that amount, that's not just those introductory positions, but that's usually where you're going to have the most churn. I mean, we have to make value decisions here. We can't pay everybody up here. So we understand that some positions might have a little bit more turnover, but certainly a pay range of $27,000 at the minimum. I mean, we know that the state of Florida, we're going to $15 an hour, so we know we're going to be at that no matter what. So even if you wanted to throw the whole thing out, you're going to take the pay range to 32 grand. You know what I mean?
It's going to be the minimum.
Yeah. I mean, they voted that in Tallahassee.
Any other questions, guys? Staff? Mr. Scott?
When we looked at the pay ranges and positions, the majority of this increase, the 400,000, is for those lower end employees. That's gone from a $13 an hour custodial position to a $15 custodial position, trying to get them to the minimum wage slightly before it happens. But we have to do it anyway. But the thought process there is, my opinion is, I'll just give my opinion, is, a custodial position, how do they survive on $13 an hour? 15 an hour is tough too, but, that's what minimum wage will be, next year. So that, again, that's most of the ones we've adjusted is those tier employees.
Park maintenance, aide, flagman.
Right.
Yes, sir.
Right.
There's only one on here that's at 32,000. Did you see any more?
You're talking about for the minimum?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I was looking.
I'm just looking through this list to see which one's 32,000. I'm just looking at the individual job positions.
So
if you look at a grounds maintenance worker now, introductory maintenance worker now, it's kind of, to your point, talking about private sector. If I wanted to go work for one of those folks just starting out and I don't know anything about anything, if I'm working at Chipotle in Tallahassee, I'm making more than $16 an hour.
I get it.
Yeah, it's unbelievable because I'm seeing it all over the country, the reset.
Well, and to your point, talking about the benefit package, Franklin, you fought with that, trying to get us good rates and good coverage. And the company I work for, I think it's caught up with it, what they're offering us now. And I'm considering the seat I'm in, either going with them versus staying here with the county, to be honest.
Don, we can't hear you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Couldn't hear a word. I said we was talking about how Franklin and them worked real hard on our insurance package this year, and the cost of that versus the coverage that is being offered. And you mentioned about the family plan being reversed, 70, 30, 30, 70. I'm looking at it myself through my company. There's not a big difference there. It may even be better with my company for me to come off the county and go back over there. So I think you're spot on that part of it. That's not such a great tool anymore. It's just saying, hey, this is the way you should work here. So
Yeah.
yeah.
So, Rob, the proposed or the potential proposal here for the new general employees pay plan on page 14, that puts the grades. That basically establishes employee pay scale, the 101, 102, 103.
That is correct, sir.
So, if I heard you right, each position throughout the county would fall into one of those pay grade buckets, classifications,
Yes,
if
Mr.
you will. Inside of that, I mean, I see the minimum, the midpoint, the maximum, but if the county was to adopt, say, this pay scale for those classifications and assign these classifications to every single job title within the county, is there still, is this minimum? I mean, that looks like minimum wage. Looks like 15. I did the math, like 15.30 an hour is a 31.2 roughly. So that gets us. We meet that legislative mandate, if you will. But is there still room in there for department heads or supervisors? Because if you have an employee that both fall into the same pay classification, but yet employee A is always willing to stay late, work overtime, come in on Saturday. He's always here 15 minutes early. He's always the last guy to leave. Employee B never wants to work a Saturday, is always 3 minutes late, leaves 3 minutes early. Is there room there for the department head or whomever, supervisor, for some fluctuation in the difference as far as rewarding the employee that's employee A that shows up all the time early, leaves late, works overtime? Is there still room in there without staying you're in bucket 101, that's what you get? So how do you establish that discretionary, I guess?
So a couple things. The minimum starting hourly wage that we're recommending is $15 an hour. Yep. So times the 2080, that's how you get to your 31.2. So let's say I'm a maintenance worker 1 and I'm being slotted into pay grade 101. So my range would be that 31.2 up to 48,360. Now, supervisors are likely going to be placed into a higher pay grade in the pay plan. But as far as progression goes, that idea of, well, how are we going to reward people differently based on performance? And I think that starts with directing staff with a policy of what you would like to see and let them bring that back to you. But you mentioned longevity. I have seen some clients where they will make longevity contingent upon a favorable annual performance evaluation.
Well, it was going to be my next question.
You've successfully been able to stay employed another year doesn't guarantee you that you're going to get this benefit that you, the board, want to award to high performers.
I guess that's where I was going, and I don't have anybody in mind, so no employee should be thinking. But I'm just saying, like in my own business, I got employee A and employee B. Employee A's been with my company 10 years. Employee B has been there for 5 years. Employee B works circles around employee A, but makes less because of his tenure. But you get twice as much work, or 30% more work out of employee B. So as long as there's the staff or someone can come up with a way to reward employee B for the work ethic, for the extra effort. I
think the consistent movement, Mr. Chairman, would be based on that CPI. So everybody gets that, whatever that is, because that's what the market moved the same for the poor performer as it did for the high performer.
Correct.
If milk goes up, both of them are paying the same amount for it. But embedded within that is the next step. How do you want to then have folks move further into that pay range? And maybe if you're knocking it out of the park and I'm not, you should be moving farther into that pay range where maybe I stay where I'm at. I get my COLA, but that's it. And that's how you start getting separation between employees over time. But that has to be based on some metric that, that's where the devil's in the details a little bit there.
Do we do employee evaluations? Just asking.
We have not. Dan has implemented something with fire rescue that we wanted to adopt across the county, where you have an annual evaluation on an anniversary date, and we'd like to move toward that. Let me say this, try to say it the right way for y'all to hear it the right way. You got Sammy and Johnny. Sammy's getting it every day. Just like I said, getting there early, whatever he can do. You got Johnny that shows up. if we give Sammy a raise, let me try to say this the right way, I don't hear from y'all that said Sammy or Johnny wasn't treated fair, because you know Sammy or you know Johnny. And I don't think this board would do that. Boards in the past got involved in the weeds of that, and it caused hiccups for supervisors. But I'm a firm believer that you need to reward those that produce and those that show up. You know, you need that body, but you don't reward them the same way. But I think we've got a group of supervisors now and department heads that see that and can make those decisions. Now, certainly having a evaluation would be a plus, and I would support that 100%, and we could start implementing that very, very soon. But we've got to have the freedom, and we've talked about this before too, by the personnel policies, we can hire somebody up to mid-range. So you get somebody that's got stellar reputation as an operator somewhere else and they want to come in, we can pay them a little bit more than minimum if we choose to. But supervisors have to have the process to give more to those that are working harder and getting more things done. So.
You think that with evaluation, and he's saying will support that, those decisions with the supervisor,
right.
That would be great
Yes.
for that? Because I've done it when I was a supervisor at Gold Kiss, and that you evaluate them, then you reward them according to evaluations. And I think there was that, Mr. Williams saying that was from my understanding. So if you start at a midpoint and raise to the midpoint, where you have up to the maximum that you can raise, like what Scott's talking about, you can raise them up from, they say that 101, the midpoint is 39,780, and you can go and raise up between the 48,360 to those valuable employees. Is that what I'm hearing? That you can set different pay scales or different pay for the valuable employee.
Well, the scale will be the same. You can just move somebody in a scale if they're a performer.
Yeah, you can raise that one up, right? So,
Yeah, I mean, I think, I don't know what the rest of the guys think, but I mean, any job that I ever had in my early days in the private sector, we always got evaluated annually, at least annually, some quarterly in places that I worked at when I was in my 20s. But why we don't do that, I mean, I don't know. I think that we're growing, and I think that we're learning, and we're trying how to figure that out. But I mean, I think that we got to come up with a way to do, at least if nothing else, annual evaluation, so that, you know, and we could look at our purchasing policy. I mean, you know, when it comes to that, not when it comes to raises, but, you know, if I got a department, and I say that to say, you know, I don't want Johnny to be friends with his supervisor, but Johnny's job performance is awfully terrible.
Right.
But since they're buddies and they're hanging out buddies on the weekend, I don't want Johnny's pay to increase above Sammy's, who's the worker buddy. He just doesn't hang out with the boss after hours.
Right. Agreed.
So I look at the purchasing policy and say, hey, in order for Johnny to get this job performance, not only does his supervisor have to sign off but also the supervisor. Right. So if that's an assistant county administrator, or if that's your HR director, or if that's your chief and assistant chief, you know, whoever, you have to have two people look at the purchasing policy basis. Well, if you're going to give this guy a 5% pay raise, you need 2 signatures on this pay raise.
Right.
You know, versus, you know, to eliminate that kind of stuff, because let's all face it, it happens. Not just here, but everywhere in the world, it happens.
Right.
And I don't want to create an environment that we help enable that to happen here.
Absolutely. And from my point of view, if I knew that, me and the supervisor would be having a little prayer meeting.
Yeah, I understand that, I don't know if that happened. I'm just saying.
Just
Just as a check and a balance, look at the purchasing policy, kind of how we did that. It's like, hey, you know, if you're a department head, you can spend X, but if you need X plus $1, you don't have to go to the board. You just got to get the next level
Right.
of employment, whether that be assistant or somebody else, to sign off on that with you. So now, if it does come to the board that Johnny got a 8% pay raise, then makes it to the board, and now you got two guys. Hey, man, like, why did this guy get, like, he's got 42 absences this year, never been written up. What's going on?
Right, agreed.
Or gal, or whatever.
It's kind of like we had that scenario with one of the supervisors said that everyone got a raise except for him and one other employee. You know, I talked about some time back, and he was left off getting a raise because of the previous administrator did not like him, so he didn't get a raise. So I think that would be great to do this on evaluation, so we won't have that problem to have that.
Right.
You know.
We can implement that.
Yeah.
Well, and that also, to me, it also protects the employee. Like if I think if I'm the employee and I'm busting my tail every single day, but or I think I'm busting my tail, but my supervisor rates me as a 1 on a scale of 1 to 10 for a couple years. Well, I'm gonna start looking for a job somewhere else because obviously he doesn't like me, or I'm not trying hard enough, and I think I'm really trying. So, you know, he could kind of be like, all right, I think it's time for me to go somewhere else. It's just, I'm not jihading here.
Well, sometimes you have to help people be successful somewhere else also.
Well, but that's what I'm saying. I would know in a couple years that they're telling me to go somewhere else.
So what I'm hearing now, so can we allow Mr. Scott to go ahead and put that into practice now, because his time is winding up, and so that could be in place before we put anybody else in office. That'd be already in there.
I mean, I'll ask the board, but I think what the board needs to do is continue to suggest or ask staff to implement some type of annual employee evaluation.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
And then let it be a trickle down. I don't expect the county administrator or assistant county administrator, whoever, to have to do 230-something employee evaluations a year. You'd be doing one a day. But I would think that the supervisor, you spread that out. And, if the employee's not getting a pay raise, he's like, hey, man, you got to improve here. Here's not getting a pay raise. Well, the buck stops at the supervisor. But if the employee's getting a 3%, he's like, hey, I gave this guy a very good evaluation. I need to give him a 3% pay raise. Then he goes to assistant, supervisor goes to his supervisor and asks for that approval for that pay increase.
Staff will sit down and work through a process and bring that back to you.
Surely these guys over here would have some ideas on how that could work, or either point us in some direction of some other counties or municipalities that are kind of doing some type of annual evaluation process. I would think y'all would have some ideas on where we could.
We would be happy
Start.
to work with your team on developing that. Yeah, of course. I just did a performance evaluation for a client at Port Arthur, Texas, where I'm going next week.
Well, I was hoping it'd be kind of like a buy one, get one.
Right,
Buy
sure.
one, get one. BOGOs. I'm all about those.
Like my dad said, don't give away for free the only thing you're good at.
Scrooge.
Yeah. But if nothing else, I could share some reports free of charge and with comments that we've done for others. And then, seriously, I'm available to your team at any time. Happy to help.
Mr. Scott, we got another meeting here. Well, we have time, but is there anything else that we need to address? I mean, this is just a workshop. There's no board action, and we got a lot of information to digest. But I think if I heard y'all, one, we want to start developing some type of annual evaluation process relatively quickly. And then two, what we need to be thinking about is if we want to go to this employee classification scale with the 101s, the 102, 103, whatnot.
Yeah, I mean, you paid us to do the study. We returned the recommendations, and I'll be honest with you, at this point, to not implement the structure, or at least an improved structure, and get your ranges where they need to be, it will start to have an impact, and not in a good way. And so I think it's great that y'all were forward-thinking enough to even take a look at this. And now you're at the point where, the good news is, as presented, I think it would be part of your normal budget deliberations, where it's not going to require some tax increase, to implement what is being recommended. But the ultimate result would be incredible improvement for your organization. To have that structure to have a structure that is fair and it is competitive, to establish new competitive pay ranges, a way to move employees through those pay ranges, having jobs placed into pay ranges that they know what that it's a market competitive range, standardizing that is an incredible improvement for you to consider as a board for sure.
How many counties are doing this? I mean, just in general, is there very many? Is it a lot, or is there few, based on your experience?
I'm project manager for a little over 30 projects in 11 states right now, but as it relates to the state of Florida, I'm utilities mostly is my area of expertise, but also do cities, counties. I know I've worked with probably close to a third of the counties. Our company has worked for almost every one of the 67 counties and done a compensation and classification study for them at some point in the last probably 5 years. It is absolutely, it's one of those things where it's one thing as a policymaker to know, do we think we should, be given more money here? Should we do a 2% or should we do 2.5%? And it's another thing to have the data to where you can know, all right, this is what competitive looks like. We're not going to be the highest paid. We're not going to be the lowest paid. But if we want to be competitive at the market average, this is what that would cost. That's why folks do the studies, so that they have the information, they have the data to where they can make an informed decision. And so the folks in the audience know that you're not just pulling these numbers out of your hind parts. You know what I mean? That it's actually a data-driven process, and that we didn't compare you to Miami-Dade, Tallahassee, Palm Beach, Collier, Hillsborough, Pinellas, where everybody's eye-rolling, going, well, of course we got to give everybody raises. Look who they compared us to. You know what I'm saying? I think it's just making it an open, transparent process, and but there's very few that aren't. Maybe our union counties, the super small ones, maybe a Liberty, some of those folks like that. But most of the ones where I think y'all are bumping up against 50,000 population. Yeah, once we get over that and up, it's pretty standard. At least every 3 to 5 years.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman. One thing that I recommend that y'all do is you can make a decision here because of a workshop, but when you talk about your budget in your budget workshop, or I'm sorry, your tentative budget hearing in a few minutes, certainly you can set aside money to fund it if you chose to, or what amount, but that'd be the time to set aside the funds and give direction to the staff to implement if that's your wishes.
Okay.
Public comments?
Yeah, if you would, just don't get too long.
Thank you.
We got a time specific.
Would you not run off? Because my questions are actually directed towards you. I got 4 things here that stood out to me. When you stated in your report that we lag behind all market peers, does that mean by average, or you're talking about there's not a county that you compared us to that we're not behind?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir. Yeah. Just, y'all share the mic if you would.
The market peers of the 11 of the 13 that were included and approved to be used, y'all lagged every one of those at every level of the market, at the minimum, midpoint, and maximum.
Okay, that answers my question. Also, was the average income of the taxpayers considered when determining the market peer group?
Per capita income was one of the, per census.gov, per capita income was one of the factors, but keeping in mind that we do adjust those pay ranges for cost of living for those that fall outside of the Suwannee County boundary as well.
The other is, if I read correctly, you had on there 23% of our supervisors did not participate in the survey. Is that correct? And if so, why was that?
We have the all of the employee surveys go out to every one of the employees, and then at the end of that process, there's an opportunity for a supervisor review. And so, we did get 89% of all of the job classifications surveyed and reviewed. But as far as of the employees that return to survey, so let's say you and I are both do the same job. We're both Parks and Rec supervisor. There may have been one of us got reviewed, but the other one didn't. And so that's why the percentage might be lower for whatever reason.
But it was because of their choosing not to participate, or?
I don't know what the reason would be for one not to be reviewed, but outside of that review, there's also a review that's done by Evergreen, and then there's also a review that's done with the senior or with the project leadership team. So we actually go through multiple review steps in the employee survey piece.
Do you have a record that you can provide the board of the supervisors that didn't participate?
No.
Okay. And my last one was, did you, in your work, did you determine, like in comparison to the other 11 counties, did you discover where we stand as far as percentage of county employees that are salaried in salary ranges compared to hourly?
You're referring to how many would be exempt versus non-exempt, sir?
Not necessarily exempt, but yet that too. Break it down: exempt, non-exempt, and then hourly.
Yeah, that is not something that we analyze because we're looking at base salaries. So, for example, if someone is designated as hourly or if they're designated as a salaried employee, they still have an annual salary. So what the market would dictate is this is the annual salary for this position. And if they're salaried or if they're hourly, it's going to be 2,080 hours is typically what we'd be looking at to get to that annual number.
And your last thing, your 230 number of employees, that included all employees for the county?
All the ones that were included in the study, yes, sir. I think we had
So
part-time and
90%?
full-time. But I don't, that's what I had.
For 90% of the...
Well, we also had the fire employees too, so I had a separate, yeah.
We have a lot of casualties.
They're seasonal.
Seasonal part-time.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And the constitutionals are the sheriff's department.
And no constitutionals. It's just Board of County Commissioner employees.
Yes, sir.
Anything else? Board members, any other questions for Mr. Williamson? Y'all good?
No, yes.
Thank you all for the business. We're grateful.
Yes, sir. Thank you for coming. Go Knowles.
I love it.
Drive back safe to Tallahassee?
I may not be able to attend the regular meeting. I may be sick now.
Yeah, whatever. You'll be fine. All I need is I need a motion to adjourn the workshop.
So moved.
Have a motion by Commissioner Perkins.
Second.
Second by Commissioner Hale. All in favor, aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion carries 5-0 to adjourn. We have another meeting here in about 20 minutes. So we will see y'all all back here. Is it 5:05?
Yes.
Yes, 5:05. We will start a budget workshop or budget hearing. Nope, I ain't.